I think that they don't want, if they was in any of those freak-off tapes, if they played a part in any of those Diddy sessions, they don't want it to get out to the general public to make up their...
We have just witnessed a moment that could spin the world of hip-hop upside down, and frankly, the internet may not survive it. After 3 decades of whispered rumors, cryptic interviews, and more blurry Shakur sightings than UFOs, Diddy's former bodyguard, Gene Deal, has finally stepped out of the shadows, and he's not empty-handed. Imagine the scene. Federal agents, fluorescent lights buzzing, and there's Gene, sweating under his old Yankees cap, producing a battered manila envelope like it's the Lost Ark. We're talking about a man who spent 30 years looking over his shoulder, clamping his mouth shut for fear of what Diddy, or maybe the forces propping him up, might do if he ever talked. But now that Diddy's behind bars, hit with a RICO case and more scandals than a daytime soap, Gene sees the storm breaking. For the first time, he claims he's safe. For the first time, he's ready to unburden himself. The bodyguard who once walked beside Diddy, who saw the veiled threats and the coded warnings, now tells the FBI that he has the smoking gun, proof that Shakur is alive, hiding out, and not just hiding from the world, but from Diddy himself.
As far as, is he gonna turn people in? Is he gonna cooperate? If the federal government wants him to cooperate, and they're gonna cut his time, because right now he's looking at 15 to life. With all the charges he had to, he won't get out till 70 years old. He about 70, that's when they start talking about letting him come to a halfway house.
Why now? That's the question burning through every chat thread and barbershop debate in the country. Why would Gene Deal risk everything after decades of silence? The answer, according to those who know him, is guilt. Guilt and a healthy shot of fear. For years, Gene has lived with the suspicion that his silence may have helped Diddy bury the truth, not just about what happened on the Vegas Strip, but about what happened afterward, when the world was told Shakur was gone. For years, Gene was haunted by what he saw, what he heard, what he was paid to ignore. Diddy's reputation for keeping his hands clean, always letting others do the dirty work, is legendary in industry circles. But when the Teflon finally peeled off, when the agents came knocking for parties and secret tapes, suddenly Diddy wasn't so untouchable anymore. Suddenly, the old guard started whispering again. Suddenly, Gene was getting phone calls at midnight, and not all of them were friendly. Let's talk about this so-called evidence. Gene isn't just tossing around wild claims, he's waving around physical proof, or so he says. The whispers started with an offhand comment to an old friend, something about a cache of documents Shakur left behind. Then, suddenly, insiders were talking about grainy photographs, maybe real, maybe doctored, but showing a man with Shakur's signature jawline, sometimes with a cigar, sometimes just walking the Havana streets. Then the real bombshell, the rumor of a tape. Some say it's an audio recording, the unmistakable rasp of Shakur's voice after the world declared him gone, talking about freedom, talking about escaping the game. Others insist there's more, travel records, smuggled letters, even a bank statement tied to an offshore account in Cuba, the same place his aunt Asada has lived in exile for 40 years. Could all this really be part of a hidden vault of evidence that Shakur prepared just in case? Did Gene get his hands on it back in the 90s, then sit on it, petrified, as Diddy's empire grew fatter and more bulletproof by the day?
Yeah, he was scared. Yes, I agree. I do agree that he was probably terrified for his life. So if that is the case, it's also quite feasible that he put up money to get Pac.
We have to ask, how deep does this go? Because the conspiracy threads are tangling like Christmas lights, and the official narrative has more holes than Swiss cheese. We all remember how the initial investigation played out. 14 shots fired, 1 bullet fragment grazes Suge Knight, and somehow, not a single credible eyewitness can name the shooter. Shakur, who wore bulletproof vests everywhere, apparently left his at home for 1 night only. The coroner lists him 2 inches taller and 40 pounds heavier than he ever was. The cremator retires the day after Shakur's supposed last ride, vanishing into the wind. And let's not forget what Shakur's own mother said. Her son chose to leave quietly. For years, nobody dared connect those dots, but now, as Diddy's name gets dragged through RICO mud, the whispers about that secret deal with the FBI have grown a lot less quiet.
On your own platform, he said this on your platform that he put up $1 million to get Pac in.
Yeah, correct. He was around Puffy and Puffy made a comment.
There's a real possibility that Gene's evidence isn't just about Shakur slipping away to Cuba. It's about how he managed to do it. More than one former death row insider has said, off the record of course, that the only way someone could vanish so cleanly was with government help, and who had friends in those high places. The story goes like this. Diddy, panicking about his rival's growing reach, puts out the call. The streets are on fire and both coasts are swimming in paranoia. Suddenly, federal agents show up at death row's doorstep, looking for dirt, but also maybe handing out lifelines. Some claim Diddy cut a deal. Protection for himself, but only if he helped with problem artists. Did that mean serving up Shakur? Or did it mean agreeing to look the other way while the FBI, the Black Panthers, and a few mysterious security consultants helped Shakur escape? Michael Nice, another ex-bodyguard, claimed he smuggled Shakur out of the US, switching bodies, flying a private jet to Barbados, then on to Cuba. Of course, Michael was found unavailable soon after teasing his own evidence to the press. Coincidence? Or just another loose end snipped clean?
Pac would have boxed him. Pac would have loved to beat his ass in the ring, raise some money, and give it to the hood.
Industry veterans loved to talk. 3 of them told us, with that special tone of someone who's seen too much, that a secret vault exists somewhere in Havana. It's supposedly full of letters, photos, and tapes that would expose everything. Not just Shakur's survival, but the entire ecosystem of silence and payoffs that kept the truth buried. Maybe Gene only has a piece of it. A few Polaroids, a copied tape, 1 or 2 receipts smuggled out by a courier who knew which pocket to grease. Maybe he has the whole thing, and he spent years figuring out who he could trust to hand it over. The FBI, for all their checkered history, finally got their hands on what Gene delivered, and you better believe they're combing through every frame, every word, every bank statement. If a single scrap ties Diddy to more than just party freak-offs, if it links him to orchestrating or even facilitating Shakur's disappearance, then Diddy's current legal mess is about to look like a parking ticket in comparison.
Chaotic. It's hard to actually figure out what's what, but it's becoming clearer. It's becoming clearer and clearer, but...
And as for the wider industry, every old-school label boss, every behind-the-scenes fixer, every faded A&R exec who remembers when Bad Boy was untouchable, they're watching this unfold with the enthusiasm of someone realizing the Titanic is sinking and they're not on the lifeboat list. Because if Gene's evidence blows the lid off, it's not just Diddy who gets pulled down, it's the web of favors, secrets, and hush money that built the golden age of hip-hop. The real power brokers never like spotlights, and if the rumors about tapes and vaults are true, a lot of them are going to have sleepless nights. All it takes is 1 credible tape, 1 authenticated letter, 1 offhanded mission caught on a wire, and the entire edifice crumbles. Consider the context. Diddy's world is collapsing in real time. Not so long ago, he was the toast of both coasts, flashy, untouchable, throwing celebrations that the FBI now alleges were fronts for activities we can't even spell out in polite company. Now, after the raids, the settlements, the parade of accusers and tell-alls, even Diddy's most loyal associates are reaching for the nearest parachute. For years, the whispers about his connection to Shakur's fate were easy to brush off as the ramblings of jealous rivals or internet truthers. Not anymore. With every headline, Keefe D flips on Diddy. FBI investigates links between raids and the 1996 Vegas shooting, new evidence delivered by Bodyguard. The wall of silence looks more and more like a dam about to burst.
Sean has to take responsibility for what he did as an individual. Sean is the one who pulled that gun out. Sean is the one who shot. So he has to take responsibility for that.
Gene's sudden courage has set off a chain reaction. Former security officers, old death row affiliates, even the surviving relatives of fallen stars are watching for what comes next. The story has always been about more than just one man's vanishing act. It's about a moment in music history when anything felt possible, when a handful of powerful men could make a rival disappear, or so the legend goes, and the rest of the world would just nod along. But as new details leak out, cryptic photos from Belize, shaky video from a club in Havana, police still hunting for suspects decades after the fact. It's getting harder to write off the conspiracies as pure fantasy. And let's not forget the Machiavelli angle. Shakur didn't just rap about faking his own end. He practically wrote the manual, dropping hints, codes, even rearranging album titles to spell out "I'm Alive K." Fans have never bought the official story. Not really. How could they? With new music dropping years after the Vegas shooting, with eyewitnesses in Cuba swearing they saw Shakur at the market, with Suge Knight, of all people, publicly stating if he was gone, they'd be arresting those dudes for the crime. You know he's somewhere smoking a Cuban cigar on an island. That's where the tension stands tonight. Diddy's legacy hangs by a thread. The FBI has new evidence in their hands, and Gene Deal, haunted for decades by fear and guilt, is finally talking. We're on the brink of seeing hip-hop's longest-running mystery shift from wild rumor to legal reality. And if the vault exists, if even a fraction of what's been rumored is true, then the whole world is about to see the golden age of the industry for what it really was. Power, secrets, and the desperate, dirty scramble to keep the biggest secret of all.
I'm quite sure everything, I am death row. Suge Knight is death row. So I'm quite sure, before it's said and done, all eyes on me and Machiavelli out of Fox have definitely come back to me.
If the stakes weren't already high enough, Gene Deal's revelation cracks open a door into the deepest, dustiest vaults of American counterculture. The kind of history that doesn't just change careers, it rewrites the legend of an entire movement. Because if Shakur really escaped, he didn't do it alone. The fingerprints on this operation, according to multiple insiders in decades of whispers, belong to the Black Panthers, a group the US government once considered so dangerous they dedicated entire agencies to tracking them down. The connection is not just circumstantial. Shakur's mother, Afeni Shakur, was a Panther. His aunt, Asada Shakur, remains on the FBI's most wanted list, living in Cuban exile for longer than some viewers have been alive. So we have to ask, how deep did this family loyalty run? How many old-school Panther loyalists with decades of underground organizing under their belts would have risked everything to help one of their own escape the machinery of both law enforcement and the hip-hop industry's new kingpins? According to a former road manager who spent time with the Panthers in the early 90s, the group never stopped running networks of safe houses, never stopped practicing the code of silence, and crucially, never stopped using the old tools of resistance. Some say the escape wasn't just a lucky break, it was a military-style operation. Money allegedly changed hands to bribe hospital officials, flight paths were cleared, passports were faked, and old Panthers quietly stepped out of retirement, blending into the chaos just long enough to get Shakur onto a private jet. Michael Nice, who claimed he was part of the operation, told TMZ it was me, my brother, the pilot, Shakur as the co-pilot, and 2 Panther guys on the jet. We took off and immediately knew we were safe, we felt good, and it was like escaping from prison. Of course, as soon as Nice hinted he had proof, he was reported unavailable. The classic fate for anyone who gets too close to the truth. There's a certain poetry in imagining the Panthers, the same people who once faced down the CIA and FBI in the 70s, pulling the ultimate fast one in the 90s, outwitting the industry, the government, and even the criminal underworld all at once. Did Diddy suspect something? Some insiders say yes. He knew the Panthers were untouchable, a word that comes up again and again in taped conversations from that era. If the Panthers were behind Shakur's vanishing act, did they leave anything behind, any breadcrumbs for future investigators to follow? Or did they wipe the slate so clean that only the most determined bodyguards 30 years later could even begin to reconstruct the plot?
Do you think people had this misconception about Tupac and what he was?
He had 2 sides to him, yes. I'm not going to say he didn't. He was, but at the same time, he just, whatever he believed in, that's what he, that was just he voiced his opinion for whatever it was that he believed in, but he also had this caring, loving side that a lot of people didn't see.
And then we hit the street-level reality of the conspiracy, the alleged sightings. Over the years, the stories have come in waves. A man with Shakur's swagger and bandana photographed in a Cuban bar, laughing with locals. Old Havana residents swearing on camera that they've seen El Rapero Americano walking the streets, shopping for fruit, always looking over his shoulder. Even a shaky cell phone video, grainy and pixelated, shows a figure ducking into a back alley, chased by a swarm of curious teenagers. Investigators like Jimmy Poole claim they have photographic proof of Shakur in his 40s, arm in arm with a fan, in Belize. One club DJ in Santiago insists Shakur once jumped on stage, rapping in Spanish for a stunned crowd before slipping away into the night. The link to Asada Shakur makes all of it more plausible. Locals in Cuba talk about the American woman who lives quietly under government protection, rarely seen, but always respected. The same officials who granted her asylum could easily extend the same courtesy to her nephew. A government source told reporters, if someone wanted to disappear, there is no better place than under the umbrella of revolutionary Cuba, especially if their family, the label hasn't commented, but the circumstantial details mount up. How many other exiles have arrived in Cuba with fake passports, new names, and strict instructions? Never break cover, never make contact, never confess.
I always said, Keisha, I'm not going to live, past a certain time, or, I know I'm going to get shot up. He knew that. That was, the one thing that he did know.
What's more, the legend says Shakur himself left clues, like a reverse scavenger hunt for those obsessed enough to follow the trail. Rearranged letters, hidden codes, cryptic lyrics, exit Shakur, enter Machiavelli. Fans still dig through every frame of his posthumous albums, every lyric that sounds like a veiled goodbye or a knowing wink. Some say he even orchestrated a few of the sightings himself, feeding the myth, keeping the story alive, while the industry tried desperately to move on. If so, what was the end game? To return when the coast was clear? Or to watch, unseen, as the whole charade came crashing down, possibly in the middle of Diddy's RICO trial no less?
Not surprised. We all know who he is and how we get down, so that don't surprise me.
The wider implications start to look less like a conspiracy and more like a chess game played on a global scale. If Diddy goes down, Whether it's for the alleged freak-off parties or something darker, what happens next? The FBI has already cracked open the doors to an era most people thought would never face legal reckoning. If Gene Deal's evidence truly ties Diddy to more than just industry politics, if it exposes government involvement, Black Panther's shadow networks, and the possibility of Shakur's survival, then we're looking at a scandal that could touch everyone from old label bosses to retired agents. But the biggest question hangs over Shakur himself. If he really is alive in Cuba, what would force him to stay silent all these years? Was it fear of retaliation? Was he biding his time, waiting for the right moment to speak out? Could he have been working in the background, feeding leaks, encouraging people like Gene to come forward? And if Shakur is ready to return, who gets protected and who gets thrown under the bus? The rumors that he might emerge to testify or release a statement have gained traction as Diddy's empire shakes. Is it wishful thinking, or has the clock finally run out on those who built fortunes on his silence?
Welcome back to Screen Scene. She was Tupac Shakur's wife. Keisha Mara Shakur is the only woman who can ever make that claim. And now in her first television interview, Keisha speaks out about her life with the slang.
We can't ignore the human cost either, the families who never got closure, the millions of fans who have kept a candle burning for decades, the friends who risked everything to keep their word. If the truth about Shakur comes out now, the emotional fallout could rival anything we've seen since the LA riots. And for the industry, it's more than a legacy problem. The old guard is terrified. Multiple veterans have told us off camera that everything's in play. If the FBI or Cuban officials ever confirm a living Shakur, back catalogs, royalties, even the story of hip-hop itself, none of it survives unscathed. As for Diddy, even a courtroom victory on the lesser charges won't mean he's out of the woods. The shadows behind his public persona are now too crowded, with accusers, informants, and former allies looking for immunity deals. The music world is holding its breath, wondering if this is the moment when decades of secrets finally get yanked into the daylight. And the rest of us, we're just trying to keep up, piecing together whispers from the vault, dodging the disinformation, and waiting for the next Bodyguard, the next Panther, the next witness to step out of the darkness with something new to say. So here's the million-dollar question as we end tonight's wild ride. If Shakur is alive, what happens when the truth finally breaks through, and who's going to pay for keeping him hidden all these years? Would Diddy fall alone, or does the whole house of cards come crashing down? Drop your theories, receipts, and wildest predictions in the comments below, because when the next chapter explodes, you won't want to say you missed it. Until then, stay curious, stay fearless, and don't believe everything you hear. Unless, of course, it comes from the vault.